In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how to use the MIA Environment Blur node. So this is a node that will allow us to pre-blur any kind of an environment map that we currently have assigned to our scene. And that'll make it much easier to achieve the effect of these really nice, soft, glossy reflections on our object without having to worry about oversampling the scene. So if we scroll down, this can be found inside the Environments tab. Now you'll notice that this shader has the MIA prefix assigned to it. So what that means is that this is a material or a shader that can only be utilized by another material that has the MIA prefix as well. So we need to make absolutely certain that we have an architectural material assigned to our object. So this environment blur can be assigned as a lens shader or an environment shader to our camera. So just go up to View, select Camera, take a look inside the attributes, and we can connect this environment blur to the environment shader of our camera. So let's take a look inside the attributes for this environment blur. Now inside the environment, what we first need to do is pipe in some kind of a standard environment map. So let's go to the checker box and plug in any of the standard mental ray environment maps. In our case, we'll use something like a spherical. And we can connect in the texture that we want to use. So let's go ahead and connect in the Digital Tutors Office Bright found inside the Source Images directory. There we go. Now let's just take a quick render at what we have. And now on this material you can see that we do have the reflections and they do show up very clearly, but they don't have any sort of blurring applied to them. So there are actually several things we'll need to do in order to really see the effect of this environment blur happen. So the first thing we need to do is take a look inside our architectural material, and we first need to make sure that there is some kind of glossy reflection that is happening. So let's make absolutely certain that the glossiness is set to a value lower than 1. And if we re-render, you can now see that we do have the effect of a blurred environment. However, this blurriness is not coming from the environment blur node. This is just coming from the standard glossiness attribute that we have here. Now the problem is if we don't use this environment blur, we do wind up with situations that have a lot of noise in our glossy reflections. Now this is exactly the type of effect that we want to fix by using this environment blur node. So let's save this image for comparison, and let's go to the environment blur attributes and start to see what we can do to control this. So right now the blurring is set to 0, which means there is no pre-blur that happens. So this is a value that ideally goes from 0 to 1. So 1 meaning we get the full blurring effect. Now below this we have the resolution. Now this is controlling how many samples of our environment will be taken at before render time and then blurred appropriately. Now even though we set the blur value up to 1, we still won't see the effect in the render until we go back to the architectural material and change one last thing. So let's go back here. And if we take a look down inside the Interpolation tab, and if we scroll down, you should see an option for Single Sample from Environment. We have to turn this on in order to now calculate this environment blur. Alright, so now, again, if we save this for comparison, and re-render, and now you can see that if we take a look at what we have now, that there is now a lot less noise in our glossy reflections compared to what we had before. So this is exactly the types of effects that we can start to get very easily now with the use of this environment blur. Now keep in mind that this is a node that's best used whenever the majority of your reflections are going to be coming from the environment. If you still have objects in your scene that are heavily reflecting each other, then this environment blur node won't be quite as much use. So that's a look at how we can use this MIA environment blur as a way of getting these nice soft glossy reflections without having to sacrifice a tremendous amount of rendering time.